So hey everyone, I was actually planning for the next video that I post to be continuing on with the Overlord Season 2 episode breakdowns. But something has come up. I feel very strongly about making a video about this series that I found randomly yesterday. You know, it was a normal night. I'm sitting down to have some dinner. I'd caught up on all my weekly series, and I'm like, you know what? Let's do the old browse functionality. You know, a nice browse. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just going through. Nothing's really catching the old eye. And I don't know what it was about this series that made me stop on it. Maybe it was the name. I think the name might have caught me. I read the small detail synopsis of this show, and I'm like, you know what? This sounds interesting. Let's give it a whirl. I get through episode 1, and I am sitting there dumbfounded that I have never heard anyone talk about this series ever. I have not heard a whisper about this show in the 6 years that it's been out. It came out in 2019, summer 2019. And I looked it up, and there was a lot of big things coming out in that season. Demon Slayer Season 2, there was Vinland Saga, Fire Force, there were Dr. Stone. There were a lot of huge name animes that were coming out that season. So I guess it isn't too surprising when you look at the lineup that, you know, something like this went under people's radars. And I think it's a luxury of me being a person that isn't reliant on YouTube to be their job, that I'm able to make a video about this. Because I'll be honest, I truly don't care if this video does well or not. I just need to let you guys know about a show I think you should check out, and at least it's worth giving a try for. And the series I am going to be talking about is To the Abandoned Sacred Beasts. So yes, as you can tell from the title, this is a dark fantasy series that I just randomly stumbled upon while scrolling, and I am just like, I'm dumbfounded that I have never heard of this show, because this was right up my alley. But I'm here today to give my thoughts on the series. There's gonna be some very, very minor plot spoilers. I'm gonna avoid those as much as I can while still being able to inform you guys on this show. So To the Abandoned Sacred Beasts takes place in an alternate reality, and in this world there is a country called Patria, and a new energy source is discovered in this country. This causes the country to split in two between the Northern Union and the Southern Confederation. Oh, wait a minute. I was reading the wrong book there. Yeah, so clearly there are some inspirations here that were taken in this show. And the world is familiar. It seems to be like a early to mid 1800s kind of style. You know, you see a lot of revolvers, you see cannons. There's a little bit of steampunkish in this world, but it seems to be, for the most part, just a little bit of an offshoot of our own world, but in like the early to mid 1800s. So this civil war breaks out between the north and the south of Patria, and the south vastly outnumbers the north. And the north basically has no chance of winning. However, this all changes when the north develops super soldiers called incarnates. And what incarnates are humans who have undergone some sort of experimentation, and they are now able to shapeshift into basically legendary creatures from like ancient myths and stuff, and monsters. They are able to turn into monsters and fight against the Southern Army. And they were created by this woman named Elaine, and their squadron is led by a man named Hank, who was a childhood friend of Elaine and another incarnate named Cain. And the incarnates are so powerful, they basically single-handedly turn the tide of the war in the North's favor. They are so powerful individually that it almost takes an entire army on its own just to take down one of them. And due to the overwhelming power of the incarnates, the North uses them quite heavily because they basically are assigned these extremely, almost impossible to accomplish missions for regular humans, but the incarnates are actually able to pull these missions off because of their power. But as the war drags on and they're forced to use their powers more and more and more, is that the more they use their powers, the more not only their bodies become like the creatures that they're shapeshifting into, but their minds as well. They start losing their humanity and giving into the animalistic instincts of the creatures that they are shapeshifting into. And after one of the squad members loses his mind in the middle of a mission and starts attacking not only the enemy soldiers, but also their allied soldiers as well, the captain, Hank, swears an oath with the rest of the incarnate squadron that if any of them lose their humanity, it is the burden of another incarnate to take down that incarnate. So the war is basically won by the incarnates, and they are viewed as like heroes and gods on the battlefield. But unfortunately, as the war nears its end, and it's obvious that the North is going to win at this point, that the fate suffered by their previous teammate that went berserk is going to happen to all of them. It is inevitable that all of them will eventually lose their humanity and become threats to the very peace that they were fighting for. I'm going to skip over some plot spoilers here, but the incarnates, due to some situations that you'll find out if you decide to watch the show, they all scatter. And the story follows the captain, Hank, as he basically journeys the world and hunts down his former teammates who have lost their humanity. It is his burden that he swore an oath. As their leader, he feels responsible to take care of those on his team that have suffered that fate. That is the most basic plot summary I can do of this show without getting into some spoilers. And I have to be honest, the first episode tells you a lot of what I just told you, but it kicks off the plot pretty fast in this show. The first thing that hit me so hard about this show was just how dark and gritty it was. I mean, this show is depressing. It is sad because something the show does is it shows us that these people were ordinary people. These were people that fought for their country. They were viewed as heroes, and they were almost worshipped as gods on the battlefield because they were, so invincible and powerful and, pulled off these miraculous events. And they devolve into these monsters that kill, and, they are now threatening the peace that they have worked so hard for, and the only resolution that can be enacted is to kill them. And that is just such a grim and sad, story that was just something that hit me very early on in the show. And I gotta say, I really appreciate that they didn't do a medieval fantasy setting for this story, which would have been really easy to do. I think that helps lend more to the fantastical nature of the incarnates, because it's a rather mundane world. Outside of the incarnates, there's really no other sources of magic. The incarnates are basically the only magical things in this show. This is not a magical world, which makes what the incarnates are capable of and who they are that much more unnatural seeming compared to the rest of the world. So going on to another thing I loved about the show is the characters. Now, I already talked about Hank and how he was the captain of the incarnate squadron. He was their leader, and now he has taken this burden on himself to put his berserk, squad mates to rest. And seeing how he changes as he's taking on this burden, as he goes through what he believes is his responsibility, and seeing how that affects him. He's not just this stonewall dude. He is a dude that he cared deeply for these people, and he now feels that it's his responsibility to save them from a fate they didn't ask for. Watching him have to go through this was so gut-wrenching, and that's just, once again, something that lends to the gritty tone of this show. It's a super depressing show, honestly. And then there's the basically deuteragonist, or is that how you say it? Deuteragonist of this show. Her name is Nancy, and once again, I'm trying to avoid plot spoilers here, but because of a variety of reasons, she ends up accompanying Hank on this journey. And at first, I just thought of her as the naive side character that is going to be an audience stand-in so things can be explained to the audience, of course. And she does fulfill that purpose as well. But watching her journey with Hank, I think provided a very valuable viewpoint of an outside looking in, because she didn't know these people, and she sees what Hank is doing and she views it as wrong. But as she starts to learn more about the incarnates and more about their pasts and more about what is actually going on with them, her viewpoint starts to change a little bit, and that contrast between these two characters was so interesting. And that's one of the strong points of the show, is character development, character interaction. The show hit this on the head. That is something that the show, I think, gets an A+ for. Now, I've been singing a lot of praises for the show, but I will say there are some very, very prominent flaws with the show. The number one for me, the biggest thing, was the pacing. I really think this would have benefited from maybe another core or even just 6 more episodes or something. The first episode, I felt like could have been at least 2 or 3 episodes. So they could have spent way more time letting us get to know the incarnates, as they were as a squad, in the war. I also have to say, in a couple of the earlier episodes, a few of the encounters with some of the teammates were not as fleshed out as they could have been. They could have spent more time, actually discovering a little bit more about the characters. It was just, a few of their like kind of backstories and stuff kind of felt like thrown in there. Like, okay, let's do this real quick. One note, like, let's move on. But then we start getting into kind of this rhythm where I thought it was gonna be a monster of the week type thing, where it's just, okay, one episode is focused on one teammate, the next episode is going to be a different teammate, so on and so forth. I thought it was going to be that. I'm 6 episodes into the show right now, and I can already tell you that it's not like that. It actually is not going to be Monster of the Week. It seems that it's going to be that way. There is a greater story here than just Monster of the Week. I have to say, another kind of hit against the show is the animation. It isn't bad, really, but it's not very good. This was made in 2019 by Mappa, of all people, and this, I guess they were too busy beating their Attack on Titan animators in order to spend too much time on this one. Fight scenes are animated pretty good. The transformations of the incarnates and everything, those forms look really good. Outside of that, the animation is pretty poor in some areas, so it's inconsistent. It's okay. It's fine, but it's definitely not one of the strong points of the show, in my opinion, outside of the fight scenes and the transformations. And this is kind of a minor thing, but it was something that just bugged me when I was watching the show. So there's this character, her name is Liza, and she is basically a military liaison for Hank. She kind of provides military support for him as he's going around trying to take down his old squad mates. And she's the fan service character for this show with her design, and there's a time and a place. There is a time and a place for that, and this show is just so dark and gritty, and then in the next freaking frame we have Liza's titties taking up half the screen, and I was just like, okay, like, did we really need that? I don't know, maybe not. It's not really a complaint, more as it was just like ridiculous. I just thought it was out of place, is all I'm saying, because this show is just so serious and dark, most of the time. There is some comic relief every now and then, but overall the show is so gritty and serious, and then we just have this obvious, fan service source. So it was just something that I had to make a note of. But yeah, this show is not perfect by any means. It's got some very obvious flaws with it. The biggest one I would say is the pacing, but also the main antagonist is kind of hilariously evil. He's just like a hate sink. Some of the secondary antagonists are kind of like that too. Some of the characters definitely seem one note too. Not all of them are fleshed out correctly because the pacing is so bad. I think the root cause of a lot of that is the pacing. But the main characters, I think, were hit very well, which was between Hank and Nancy, and those interactions there are very, very important, and I think they nailed those. And also how Hank and Nancy interact with the squad mates that they are finding, and the squad mates that they're interacting with there. Just the tone that was captured by this story, I think, is a very, very high note. And that's the thing about this show that I think caused it to go under the radar so hard, because number one, it's not long running, so it's not super popular. Number two, it's not like a 10 out of 10, like you have to watch, must watch show, but also it's not terrible. So that is the reason I think it's not one extreme or the other, and that's why I think no one knew about this show, or why at least I haven't heard about a whisper about this show. I think it was just good. I think so far it's been a pleasant watch. I plan to finish this series. Like I said, I'm 6 episodes in. I haven't finished it yet, but I have a feeling I'm gonna enjoy the rest of the ride here. And I really wanted to make this video not really entirely as a review, but more so as a PSA that I think this show is definitely worth a watch, in my opinion, for any of my dark fantasy people out there. I mean, that's my core audience here with Overlord. Overlord's a dark fantasy, and this show's a dark fantasy too, and I like it. I like the show. I think it would be worth your time to at least check it out. Form your own opinion on it. Let me know, because I just can't believe I had not heard anything about this show, because it's in a genre that I like so much. This seems to be a pretty decent dark fantasy, and it's very gritty, very sad and emotional, and it brings a lot. It makes me feel a lot watching these events. As a matter of fact, it might actually be too sad for some people, so I can't guarantee you'll love it or anything like that, but I definitely think it's a gritty, good dark fantasy series that is worth your time to at least check out and try. So that's what I think you should do. So have any of you heard of this show? Like I said, I know it came out 6 years ago, but I had never even heard a whisper of this show. So if you guys had, let me know. Let me know your thoughts on the series. If you do, or if it's new to you, let me know what you guys think. Maybe you guys feel differently about it. I want to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video about me talking about just a random anime that I found that I liked, please like the video to let me know, and I'll make some more videos like this. And if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know, and it'll let you know when I post in the future. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye.